Boom. There we go. Yes, sir.
Okay, good to go. Okay, thank you so much everybody for coming. Again, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jako. Born and raised in South Africa, in Johannesburg, but half of my family is from Cape Town, half of my family is from Johannesburg. Basically, long story short, I'm sure as many of you, I got into fishing through my father. As my earliest memories is me fishing on or sitting on the beach. Actually, we've got some photos where I'm sitting in between his reels and the baby thing in the back of his truck while fishing on the beach. So it was kind of inevitable that that was going to happen. Then kind of just fish. I did other sports in school too, but also obviously a lot of fishing, started doing that competitively, and then went to university, tried to get myself educated. And did a bachelor's degree in marketing, but in that same time I met a guy called Keith Rosenas, and he is now currently like the guy that's in charge of most of the islands out in the Seychelles. But the funny thing is when I met him the first time, it's kind of like probably a meant to be thing, because at that stage I didn't even think guiding was an option. But he looked completely worn out. He looked terrible, and I just saw him. I saw him. He was wearing a fishing shirt that I remember the brand that had a fishing brand on. And I asked him what he did, and he actually just came back from a season of guiding in Russia. So that explained the rough look on his face, because that's every day drinking vodka with clients and catching fish, and the sun never going down. So yeah, and then he basically explained to me what he was doing. I thought it wasn't still possible, but he said if you follow these steps, maybe you can become a guide. And what I ended up doing was following exactly in his footsteps. I finished my degree. I went to London, and firstly I wanted to try and get a job in marketing. And I remember the first job I had, it was still kind of like a temp job. I was sitting, and I worked really hard the whole day, and everybody went for lunch, and I thought I was going to go to get lunch. I was going to just play around on the internet and look at fishing stuff. And as I had this giant fish on the screen, the CEO of the business came in there and just gave me the biggest lecture on like how much potential I had and all sorts of baloney, and I kind of didn't listen to him. The next day I went to a shop called Farlow's and asked them if I could, if they had a job for me, and then I started working at the fishing shop. And as my life goes, I always wanted to go to the next thing, and then I told everybody I wanted to become a guide. And about a year into working at the shop, I ended up just calling him out of nowhere and asking him if he had a job available, because I was following his footsteps. And 2 weeks later, I was guiding people in the Indian Ocean into, but at that stage it was so crazy. I mean, we were catching between 10 anglers like 370 plus GTs a week. I remember my first week was 373 GTs. So you actually become a gilly. You're not a guide. You're just landing fish for people. I mean, we were very spoiled at that stage. And again, I just wanted to kind of see more places and keep progressing as a guide and a fly fisherman. And then I managed to get a job in Norway and then in Russia. And at one stage, I was guiding between 300 and 320 days a year, where I would be in the Seychelles for 3.5 months, fly to Norway, guide there for 3.5 months, go to Mongolia straight from there for 1.5 months, then back to the Seychelles, and then kind of finish a few little local guiding stuff in South Africa. And then I kind of just kept on progressing with that, and luckily I still actually happened to get married. My wife has been very nice. And now, again, we came to the US, and we've been in the US now for about 6.5 years, 7 years, and I've been guiding kind of since then full-time on the Texas coast, out of Port O'Connor, and also doing hosted trips in between that when I'm not guiding. So that's kind of the long story of it. What I do with a lot of the times that I've worked on this little presentation is that, you know, like I would probably say 99% of the time, the question that I get asked about what's my favorite places to go to in the world. And I do understand that some of these places are very far off the grid and difficult to get to, and some of them are also potentially maybe very expensive. But this is something that I think that some of the best places to see in the world for a variety of reasons. just not necessarily just the fish species, but the locations and how they differ. And they're not all particularly saltwater. However, most of the stuff that I do is saltwater. But yeah, I mean, just to kind of start off, particularly the one thing that I think that adds a lot of value doing these different trips, that's added a lot for me in my life, is just firstly, you know, having lived in the US, and I've said to a lot of people now, I'm going to become a US ambassador, just saying on how amazing the US is compared to other places in the world. Because if you travel to Africa or third world countries, Bolivia, South America, you realize there are amazing people out there that's got nothing in this world, and you also realize that not everything works as smooth as it works in the US. You don't always have electricity, you don't have internet wherever you go. You know, there's just all the things that we can very easily take for granted. And my wife and I have taken stuff for granted already. Like last year we lost power for a day. Can you believe it? And it was so inconvenient to us. But in South Africa, my parents are living without power for 12 hours a day. I mean, that's just part of their life, and they get by and they're still happy. And the nice thing about all of these things, it's changed a lot now with locations, because it's very hard now in the modern world to be disconnected completely from the world. I mean, it's unfortunately, when I was guiding at most of these places, there never used to be internet or anything like that. But for partly safety reasons, the guys added internet. But you know, it's changed the whole environment so much, where as people used to come back and have no distractions and talk about the day's fishing, now people are quickly checking their emails. And so it's kind of sad, but it would be nice when you go to these places to try and disconnect as much as you can possible, because it's, especially the world, the way things are going now, switching the news on kind of makes you just sad. That's why we all go fishing. And then also part and parcel of the whole trip is just nature in itself. Again, with social media and all the advances of technology, just seems so weird that people aren't getting out more often, and that's why these things are super nice, because we realize actually how important it is to get outside. And like I just said also to Richard, like for me, when I'm guiding every single day, and I explained to my wife that I, at that point, am thinking about nothing else but getting my clients into fish, or catching fish, finding fish, making plans, thinking about, and there's nothing else. When we come back after a day's fishing, that's kind of when I'm like realizing, okay, this is going on in the world, or this is going on in the world, and then it makes you sad, and then you go fishing again. So the 5 different places that I'd say top 5, and this is no particular order, but there's a whole bunch. I can name a list of 30 places, but the Seychelles is always going to be a special place. This is usually the one first and foremost that I mentioned, because I started full-time guiding in the Seychelles, and you know, it's probably still one of the most untouched places on the planet. However, there's more and more people that fish there now. But if you just look at the small amount of pressure and just how, I mean, those places. So to travel to the Seychelles, basically you from the US, and from Dallas it's kind of easy. You kind of Dallas, you can fly to Dubai, and from Dubai you get to Mai, and then you've got a chartered flight to whichever island you're fishing at. So usually, like I explained to some of the guys yesterday, when you're going on these trips, usually, and it is very difficult to get away these days, but usually you have to plan for at least a day and a half of travel before and after. That's just kind of the reality of it. And the one thing that you have to realize is things also is not going to always go smooth. You're going to have a bag that goes missing. I was with a group in the Seychelles earlier this year, and I had a backpack on my back. I had nothing else with me. We made a plan, and everybody caught amazing fish, and it didn't really matter whether or not I had my bag with me or not. This photo is just kind of just out of Guam Atoll. It's this place. The unique thing about the islands in the Seychelles is they all have their own little personality. They all have got a lot of different fish, but like Pua, there's a really well-known place for permit. And then you get Cosmolito, which is known GT capital of the world, and then you get Alphonse, which is like the place where they found out how to catch permit. And then there's Farquhar, where we found out how to catch bumphead parrotfish. So they all got their own little. So again, also when I've got people asking me about where in the Seychelles to go, I'm like, it's difficult to choose one particular one, because they've got their own personality, and they also differ a little bit in look. These are just kind of usually the main target species, the giant trevally, and then the bluefin trevally I think is even prettier and nicer. But then, like usually what I do, when I, again, been fortunate enough, when I go to these places now, I try and catch the fish that maybe people don't know that's catchable, or just something for myself. always refer to myself in my own capacity as a fish slut. I'll catch anything that swims. I'm happy, whatever it is. If it's happy to eat my fly, I'm happy to try and catch it. So yeah, I mean, there's very colorful things. That one in the middle there is the bumphead parrotfish, which was one. Again, we were very fortunate in the early days in the Seychelles to catch fish that was deemed uncatchable. Like, I mean, people were just walking past them at that stage, not even considering to try and cast a fly at them. We had enough time where we could actually try and I mean, the different methods it took us to get down to the most basic technique to catch those fish is impossible. Like, we were trying strike indicators, and then we were getting bitten off, so we were trying pieces of wire. They wouldn't eat that, and we were like reverting back and forth, and eventually we just used straight leader with a crab, and it was just the technique that we used to catch them. So that's kind of the fun thing. The guides are epic. There's not a single place that I mentioned here that's not going to have some of the best guides on the planet. The one thing to remember, these guys, their whole day revolves around getting new fish. There's not like they are the best of the best, and they spend a lot of time on those islands. So yeah, I mean, they're there too. The one fish there on the bottom corner there that's an Indo-Pacific permit, and we might, if there's enough time, I'll show you guys a film called Four of a Kind, where we started. We did this thing where we caught 4 different species of permit. Yeah, and then just again, I'm going to run through these pretty quickly and then leave you guys some chance. If you have any questions, we can just answer any questions, and if you can remember, or even you can stop me if you wanted to ask something particularly scared you forget. So the other one is Bolivia. This is again a completely other spectrum and part of the world. I don't want to go into, like, I actually have a map where I can sort of show you, pinpoint you exactly where these locations are, but that'll be too much time. But so the nice thing about Bolivia, again, it's probably going to be quite a bit of travel to get to these places, but the one thing about this place is it is pure jungle. Like, I remember the first time when we walked in there, we were actually on a filming project, and the one guy that I was filming with turned around to me and asked me if it was a velociraptor making these noises, but it was a parrot. I mean, the place was covered in parrots, and there's monkeys, and there's just like the sheer volume of animals, and then you're basically fishing. There the river was blown out a little bit when I took that photo, but you're usually fishing pretty crystal clear water for the majority of these, what they call the golden dorado. The local people don't really like anybody referring to them as golden dorado, because dorado actually means gold. So they're dorado for them.
Gold.
Yeah, the gold. But the thing is, again, what I enjoy about all these locations is, like, if you speak about Bolivia, dorado is probably the one that's going to jump up first. But again, there's a plethora of species to catch out there. And I usually, with all the locations, even on the Texas coast, I kind of try and figure out my own little grand slam of fish that you can catch. 3 different species in a day. And in Bolivia, the one that I really like to do is you catch a dorado, a yataranya, and a pacu. And those pacu are super technical. They're kind of like the permit, jungle permit. They're really tricky to catch. You have to land the fly right, but they're super strong. They're definitely one of the strongest fish out there. And for me, probably, I don't really keep and eat a lot of fish that we catch, but that one there is definitely the tastiest fish on the planet. The ribs on it is like pork ribs. It's insane. It's fatty and it's nice and it's fruity. So it's really nice. And then again, most of these fish everybody would turn a blind eye to, but there's these different catfish, sarubis and the matoru catfish. And I mean, those matoru catfish can grow up to over 300 pounds, and we've seen them in there, and they get massive. And we've only now, kind of the last 2 years, figured out how to catch them on fly. And then, yeah, I mean, like that particular scene there is just going to show you how cool the little rivers. So I have to mention the story. So this fish here that I caught here was one of my biggest dorado I ever caught. And this, when I was with this native guide at the time, it showed me how badly we were disconnected from nature. This guy that was with us, I was wearing sunglasses, wading boots, looked like somebody that's, yeah. He had no shoes on, he had no sunglasses on, he had one eye that worked, and he saw this fish behind me before I saw it. Like, he literally tapped me on the shoulder and said, "There's a giant fish behind you," before I saw it. And I was like, "What?" Yeah, and we've tried to give these guys sunglasses and all these things that we think that'll make their life easier. They always revert back to just barefoot. Their feet are like this big and it's like this wide. They're just like, and I mean, they'll also, without you noticing anything, they'll suddenly disappear into the jungle with a bow and arrow and go shoot a monkey or a parrot and just come back out. And it's kind of weird when they want to try and give you that delicacy, because the monkey is a very big delicacy there. When they burn the hair off, it kind of looks like a little child. So you gotta, when in Rome, you kind of gotta dig in. Wow.
So monkey brains are the delicacy.
I usually like sometimes
monkey brains.
Yeah, exactly. Like Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones.
I'm about catch and release. But yeah, like I told you that story earlier, again, just showing you how connected those people are with nature is, I mean, the way that they hunt, this one chief of the village on the Amazon explained to me like how they had the different bows, how they were hunting like jaguars and all these different things, and you like, these guys are still doing all of that stuff with bow and arrows, and just like, I mean, yeah, they make us look super weak. Very, very weak.
So Jako, on the Dorado, I'm sorry, on that slide with the Dorado, and then you went to I can't pronounce it, but you were talking about how technical that one fish.
Oh, the pacu?
Right.
Yeah.
And we just got back from Argentina, and lucky guy over here went in a couple days early and went Dorado fishing. And with the guys were talking about how technical Dorado are, so I can only imagine how hard Dorado are to what you were trying to do to catch them from that technical standpoint.
Yeah, because I mean they omnivores, but then they make it difficult because you never really know of the day what they really want to eat. So I've had days where they'll eat a big brush fly like you would normally, and then some days they won't eat anything but like a small fruit fly. And you find them a lot of the times in area. This is again how in tune the guides have to be. The wind has to blow a specific direction, and then there's a tree where they particularly fall off and the fish will wait underneath there. But you have to know every single bend in the river to have the right place where the wind's blowing the right direction to get those fruit. So, I mean, there has been people that just kind of plopped the fly and then both got lucky. But yeah, I mean, I'll take that all day. But
So
that's the reality.
I got a question, man. So there had to be someone that was the first person that went here from a fly fishing perspective, that kind of discovered this as a great fly fishing destination. Do you know much about that background, like who that person was, or because I'm sure you're going there as an angler, you're not going there as a guy.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, there were guys. So this guy Marcelo Rodrigo, one guy lives in Brazil, one guy lives in Bolivia. Most of them are from South America originally, like Argentina. There was another guy that went with him in Argentina. He used to guide with me in the Seychelles, and he was a guy. So if you think the monkey thing was kind of crazy, this guy went there. He was one of the first guys to go in there with Marcelo and Rodrigo, and they went up far enough to where, most of those people at this stage, most of the native people have had human contact, but this village was really off the grid. And when they arrived at the chief, most of the time it's obviously they assume that these guys are going to try and invade their area, so it's very aggressive at first, and then when they realize you're just fishermen with sticks in your hand like that trying to catch fish, then they kind of relax a little bit. And what happens then, if you start spending enough time with those people, they get to know you a little bit better, and then they want to kind of like bring you into their group. And the one thing these guys had to do, and like these things, we have these things everywhere around the world when you go in as a guide for the first time or to explore a place. The worst thing that they had to do is the ladies at that village would chew cocoa leaves and spit it in a bowl and ferment it. And as a delicacy, you have to drink that. And they had to do it. You can't really turn around, because then they'll take offense to it, and then
you're drinking saliva.
You gotta suck it up, yeah. In Mongolia, we used to have to go in every season. We had to eat like mutton fat. That's their delicacy, because they have to fatten up for the winter time, because it's no joke there in the winter. And also drink fermented yak milk, which is not too bad. It sounds different.
Jeez.
But yeah.
Different world.
Yeah. Yeah. The cocoa leaves.
Regurgitating.
The cocoa leaves kind of like, so what they do also, the natives, it's called bolo, where they have the cocoa leaves that they mash up with bicarbonated soda, and gives you a pretty damn good high. Like so I'll continue this, but I'll tell you guys a story. So last year what happened is I was involved in a plane crash in the jungle.
Last year? It was
It was last year, 10 September.
Jeez,
So we done with the guiding the trip. Everybody was happy. Luckily, what happened is I was the only guy of the Westerners. There were two other guys that was from another camp in this Cessna 206. We took off from the Oromama village to fly to Santa Cruz, where you take the international flight from. What happened was we were in the air for about 15 minutes. We'd reached altitude. I was looking at because I'm a big dude, so I always sit in front as a co-pilot. The instrument started doing funny stuff, and the guy banked to the left to go back to the Oromama village immediately. And in my positive mind frame, I thought we could just fly back, check the engine, and then fly back there. And as soon as that thought process went through my mind, the big oil spill came in front of the window, it blew up, and smoke came out the front, and the engine and all the instruments just went down. So the pilot didn't panic, strangely enough. Like, he slowed the plane down, started calling Mayday, but all super relaxed. Like, at that stage, you wouldn't assume that we're going to crash. The only time that I realized that we were going to crash was when he started looking at the jungle. I'm assuming where we're going to land. So basically what he did, he just kept on slowing us down. The plane kind of went slowly. My clients flew this way as we were heading back that way, and then we just kind of disappeared into the jungle. They thought we were dead. What happened was we hit a few trees. He lifted the nose up a little bit, kept the plane upright, and then we hit a big tree on the left wing and went down this way to kind of bank to the left. We hit the ground pretty quickly, but we were like about a foot off the ground. And what happened then, the big thing, like I said to you, is both wings were broken over the doors, and the aviation gas was blowing all over us, and there was smoke coming out of the engine. So we assumed this plane was going to blow up. And we were stuck, so we couldn't open the doors. The pilot managed to bust open the door because it's like I don't know what the window is. It's like acrylic, like a hard plastic. I couldn't, like, the front one of mine was broken, but there wasn't enough space for anybody to get out. So he managed to get out his window, and the guy next to, like behind him, got through there, and I got the guy that was behind me out the door. We got away, and then look, we quickly did an assessment. Nothing blew up. We had a few broken ribs, few damaged lower back issues and stuff. The pilot's face was messed up. But they eventually got our GPS coordinates a few hours later. They sent out a crew of 4 native guys with machetes. They found us. With the lodge manager, they walked us to a dry river bank. The point where the story just goes the craziest is that the native guys left us at the dry river bank. The helicopter had to leave that was fetching us because it was nighttime. So the natives went back to the crash site. There were just the 4 of us sitting there around a campfire. Everybody fell asleep. And then I started noticing a Jaguar behind us cruising around looking for an early breakfast, because at that time it was about 4 a.m. It was kind of just hugging behind in the jungle, and then it just started coming closer to inspect. But being from Africa, we spend quite a lot of time around animals, and I kind of very disillusioned and crazy ran up to it and just started making noises and make myself look big, which is not that hard. And it ran away. It came and had a second look at us before the helicopter came, but nothing happened. So, but yeah, to tell the story, I was guiding with a rod show tournament a week later. So that's one of the things that happened.
You could have told us that you punched it in the face, and we would have believed you, man.
Yeah, I still did.
Literally.
I can make that story up now the way I want. Yeah, it was pretty wild. But
so good.
I mean, in reality, everybody was safe. I mean, it's accident. It wasn't pilot error or anything. It was just like, I mean, as much time as you want to replay that in your head, it happens.
Sounds like the pilot did a pretty good job.
Yeah. We only realized like it was really bad when we arrived back in Santa Cruz, because now we still have to do the flight, and all of us are like, I'm not flying with a single prop plane ever again. No, it's done. And then they send a single prop plane. I'm like, you guys have to come back. Anyway, it was good we faced the fear going back in there, because I said to the guys, look, we escaped here with our lives. I think everybody's going to want to fly with us from here onwards, because how many times are going to happen twice?
What else? So that was Bolivia, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's still 100% one of my top priorities. Like, I've already got 2 weeks booked there for 2025. The best weeks I can find. Yeah, I mean, so again, like such an awesome. The next 2 places I'm very biased about, because I'm from South Africa, and these places are both in Africa, Tanzania. I would probably say that a tigerfish is probably I would say the hardest hitting freshwater fish in the world. Like the way that they hit a fly, you'll go there and come back with your hands just shredded up from your fly line as hard as those fish hit the fly. Absolutely amazing, and you've got all the wild animals. And to fish for a fish, like if there was a fish in Africa, that's what I would paint if I didn't know what a fish looked like in Africa. That's what I would thought it looked like. Very ferocious, yeah, super, super hard hitting. They jump and they do, there's a lot of people that want to compare Dorado to tigerfish, but I'm going to lean, I love the Dorado because of the sight fishing element, but when you fish topwater for these things, it's pretty hard to beat. And again, like with every other fishery, like I mentioned, you got the different, like the yellowfish, there's a fundu, which is our kind of African catfish, and then a dunguni, or I'm sure I pronounced or bastardized it also. That's like the pacu that I mentioned in Bolivia. They kind of said, like at some stage when the whole world was one piece, when this split up, this is the evolutionary development of these fish, and then in Bolivia, that's what happened in Bolivia, the way those fish ended up. And you have the big five around you too, which is pretty damn awesome fishing in a place where you've got, the hippos can get sketchy a little bit. I know there was one trip the year before the last time I went where the guys got T-boned by a hippo and pushed for about 100 meters until it bounced and left them alone, which is not always the case. A hippo, when he gets you, he's going to kill you. Gabon is on the west coast of Africa. The one little, like I wouldn't say like it's a secret, but the majority of the world's biggest tarpon is caught in Africa. The world record is in Guinea-Bissau, which is just north of Gabon. We've caught my personal biggest tarpon is caught in it was actually down south. It was in Angola. It was like 236 pounds on a fly rod, and we've jumped bigger fish and landed bigger fish in Gabon. Definitely. One unique thing is that you can actually target giant tarpon from the beach too. But one thing I would say about this destination, it's probably one of my favorite on the planet, but it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, you're getting bussed around by waves, and it's very odd times you fish because you fish according to the tide. So you'll maybe go out at 2 a.m. in the morning and cast flies out, but you'll have tarpon feeding 10 feet from you while you're standing in the water just stripping a fly. And it's wild. It's definitely very special. You get the longfin jacks. They've got a few different species of jacks, which is a film that I made. Also, again, if there's enough time, we can play all these films, or I'll just send it to all of you guys to go watch at home. That is probably one of the. It's hard to say whether the jack in Texas or GTs or jacks, if you put them toe to toe, which would be the strongest one, because this one is insane. Like it's extremely strong. And then you've got like the African, the giant African threadfin, Cabera snapper. Everybody goes to South America to go catch the big Cabera snapper. The season before last, they caught a Cabera snapper on fly of 60 kilos on the beach, on foot, 15 feet away from the angler. That's a 130-pound snapper off the beach, on fly.
Jako, so when you go to West Africa and you're going for giant tarpon, what is the area like where you're staying? Are you staying in the jungle, or are you staying in a pretty gnarly village, or what's that like?
So there's two places. There's one where you fish on Port Gentil, which is like a harbor, which it's Africa, but you stay in a decent hotel. Like most of these African countries have like a French influence to it, so they speak like a French Creole. So it is quite, I wouldn't say modernized. I mean, it still feels like Africa, but it's strangely enough pretty safe, like very safe. I think the most unsafe thing about Africa would a lot of times be the animals itself. Like in Setacama, when you go fish there, so that's the other location, that's more on foot. Like Guinea-Bissau is more on a skiff. There's a friend of mine that started developing the guiding game there for tarpon purely. He's fishing off skiffs more like you would in the Texas coast, like reasonably deep water, rolling fish, laid up fish, and those are the big goals, like the really like, he told me this year that he got one landed of 280 pounds on fly, and he said he definitely jumped a 300 pound on fly. He doubled up what he said was on two fish of 200 pounds, which I believe. I mean, it's Africa. It's like any of that stuff's possible. The Setacama place, I would say, is more of a wilderness place where you can go and fish for all these wild fish, and then you can go walk around with gorillas like 5 miles down the road. So it's wild, and the one nice thing, there has been some political unrest in Africa, in Gabon particularly, because they try to overthrow the elections, but the president of Gabon currently He's a big conservation, he's big in conservation, so he's closed off a lot of areas for commercial fishing, hunting, everything. So it's a big conservation area in Gabon.
Wow. I was going to ask about that. Has that settled down some? Because it was a coup, right?
Yeah, my buddies are all there, and they said, like, again, the news that hits the US is completely bent out of shape. Like, they'll say there's a civil war going on in a place, and then it'll be two guys that threw rocks at each other or something. The news is so broken in the US. Like, I mean, not saying that everything is not realistic, but like the stuff that happened in Sudan, that was pretty bad. And that's sad because Sudan has a very special fishery also, but I mean, for the people themselves, that was bad. They had to actually evac some people out of there. So that was whatever, I don't even think that much was on the news about Sudan either. But the realistic thing again, there's like third world countries, and you know, there was also this whole story that happened in Bolivia about this one lodge that got burned down by apparently a fellow, like the guys that I went with, and there's this whole story about it, and everybody asked me to have my opinion, and I said to them, look, if you're not living in a third world country, they could have not paid the native people, they could have treated somebody badly. Those people will take their land back in a second. Even the Seychelles, like that friend of mine that runs the operation, he tells me every day, like, if you want to own a place as an individual, like a lodge, you want a vanilla place. You want a place like Bahamas or like these places easy accessible. You don't want to really own any of these places. You're just going to go fish it. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, again, like the elephants that walk around, there's plenty of cool wild animals there. This last one in the top 5, I still think is one of the sort of the last frontiers in saltwater fly fishing with the development of Google Earth and all that stuff that we have now to find places. I have booked Australia as a host now for like the next sort of like future, just because it's very well priced. It's a little bit, I mean, Australia's out the way. I mean, you have to usually fly from LA, and then from LA to Sydney, and then or Brisbane, and then to Cairns, and then you can get to these places. So it's a bit of a travel, but totally worth it, because you have in Australia you have 2 different species of permit that you can fish for. There's one called the anak, which is the only indigenous permit in Australia, and then there's the block eye, which is the one we get in the Seychelles too, that golden looking one. And then you've got a fish called a blue bastard, which is this one. Also, again, it's like the red fish in the US. Yeah, we did a film on it called Glorious Bastards. That was pretty funny. We were fishing for permanent, and it came out pretty awesome. Queenfish plenty. They're also very, very cool to catch. There are some GTs. The only thing about Australia, the season, you don't always fish the season when the big GTs are around, because it's the same time they've got the box jellyfish also around, which some of you may know. Box jellyfish sting, you're done. It's over. They've got the tusk fish there too. Yeah, it's like in the Seychelles, there's a thing called the cone shell, the Conus geographus. It's got this very beautiful looking shell, but it's got like a little hypodermic needle that comes out, and if we give this long briefing to our clients to the point where they don't even want to go out fishing. But like that one in particular, we say, like, if it stings you, you find a shady spot so you don't smell funny when they get you, because there's probably nothing nobody can do. We touch wood, we've been extremely lucky. I mean, it's been 3 decades now that the Seychelles has been in operation, and there's been no fatalities due to any sort of animals or anything like that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like I said, just Australia itself. And then usually I kind of say there's more affordable trips, because I know that not everybody's going to spend $20,000 on some crazy trip, and then also the airfare and all that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, one of those places, Sudan, that kind of is now at the moment a big no right there. But again, I mean, most of you, like Mexico is easily accessible. Costa Rica is one of my favorite tarpon fishing spots in the world. There's 3 different spots you can fish. You can fish the Sexola River, which is on the border of Panama and Costa Rica. Then there's the Rio Colorado, which is the one that I kind of prefer, because I think it's got the highest density of a lot of tarpon in one area. And then there's the Jungle Tarpon Reserve, where you fish like a little river for gigantic tarpon. It's amazing. It's like 120 miles away from the ocean. We had a researcher come with us once just to kind of figure out if these fish migrate or they're actually native fish, and if they do spawn, because we actually started finding smaller tarpon. So there's some cool things that happen there. I mean, the whole South America is just absolutely amazing. There's a lot of cool things to see there. I mean, some of these photos are just kind of random fish. That one big one there is that arapaima that you catch in this place called Pirarucu in the Amazon. This was actually in Sudan. Sudan. The reason why I love Sudan so much is it's probably the place that has the best trigger fishing on the planet, that I think. I mean, you just can catch. This is just in Baja for rooster fish off the beach. If you want to not treat yourself and physically abuse yourself, that's a lot of fun. This was actually at the Rio Colorado for the tarpon fishing. This is just Texas, some jacks, and yeah, I mean, that's just kind of the stuff that I do on a weekly basis. The Texas coast, again, a lot of people ask me why I ended up on the Texas coast. There's a specific reason. I mean, there's stuff that we keep pretty secretive, but I really love jacks because it's the easiest access for me to the fix that I can get for like the same thing I get with GTs. And also there's a plethora of species. I had a kid 2 years ago, in one day, he caught a redfish, a sheephead, a trout, a flounder, a drum. He caught every single species you can on the coast except for a tarpon. We couldn't catch the tarpon that well. And like I mentioned before, last year with a client, managed to get, I'm getting a replica made now, that I got a 201 pound tarpon on the coast on fly with a client after 5 hours and 53 minutes.
Tell us more about that. Like, and you don't have to, obviously competitively, like, not that you don't have to share everything, but like,
no,
was it in shallow water? Was it deep? You used a fly? How did it all go down?
So the really big ones, I've got this all on video, which is kind of a shame because you can't share any of it on social media. Yeah. The biggest one that I catch is 5 minutes from the town, and it's in a spot it's 4 foot deep, and the fish sit there laid up. The thing is that you have to be a little bit patient. You're going to have to wait for them. You usually see them. The last year, the 2 biggest ones I caught were laid up. You could see them clear as day. But then sometimes you would see a fish roll, and then you would just kind of cast in front of it. So that is that specific spot, but it is very specific. But the rest of the tarpon fishing, it's hard to sell as a guide because it's very weather dependent. If we have to get into the Gulf, we need the wind to be a little bit lower. I'm busy building a boat now that'll give me a little bit more access to the water when it's a little bit bigger, if my clients are good to go with it. But nobody's really kind of figured it out. The only thing we've figured out is that the numbers seem to be more and more. As long as the guys don't pressure them really hard, because the only issue we had this year is when we got on the tarpon, like I said, that strategy, we've got 4 guides working together, and we'll usually try and block off an area so that nobody can come into our area. But this year we had a lot of trawling boats like hammering us on our areas, and now we've got like 2-way radios that we go radio silence on different channel and all sorts of stuff that we kind of go to different spots. But I'd have to say nobody's figured the game out. They just know when the weather's good. I look for other stuff like water temperature, thermoclines. Like some days they'll be in the 3 foot of water, some days they'll be at 35 foot of water. They'll be staging in certain areas, and sometimes you can just get to the right spot, and it can, like the Texas tarpon, the beautiful thing about it is they eat anything. This year, the nicest thing that I will remember forever is just one of my clients that particularly fished Isla Morada every year of his life. Came fishing with me, didn't expect tarpon fishing at all. I went to a spot, the sharks started migrating through, and what I like to do is if we want to catch something big, the sharks, especially the spinner sharks, they're as much fun as a tarpon because you hook them, they jump. We were sitting in a spot, I had a couple of ladyfish as like chum hanging in the back, and just these 2 tarpon rolled up, and they were sitting literally like this deep. The first one actually ate the fly, chasing it for 20 feet, and when she ate the fly, when she hit the tail, her head came all the way out, and she hit the sand with the tail. That's how shallow she was. And they just tried to greyhound away from us. So it's particularly, I'm in that spot for a reason. Like there's cool stuff that happens, but as any other place, there's also tough times. There's days where it makes you question your sanity, whether you like it or not. But it's always nice to be out there. I kind of make the most of it. Like this was just kind of a checklist, and I tell a lot of people that this is the most frequently asked questions about, like, because a lot of times I'll get clients emailing me saying, what's the best time of the season? and then I like say to them, like the operators, like if you ask me what's the best time for jacks in Port O'Connor, I have found jacks as early as March, but I would say the safest bet would be from May until October, and that is the best time. I can't tell you like this day is going to be the best, this day is going to be the best. That's the season, and that's the same with all these places, Seychelles, Bolivia. They have a season for a reason. That's what they book. So you can maybe try and get other stuff in there like moon phases or all that when you start getting really detailed. And the one thing about that adds a lot of value to any of these trips or any of the fishing stuff is obviously practicing your casting, which is something that everybody always says. But the other thing is also, Texas has made me fat, but fitness is a good thing. Fitness is something that will, like in Bolivia, if you can walk a little further, you'll catch more fish. In the Seychelles, you can walk a little bit further. If you stay focused, if you can chase the GT down, you'll catch a lot more fish. And when you spend all that money, it'll make the trip a lot more valuable and memorable for you. And then the one thing, I mean, I'm not going to mention all the other stuff, but the other thing that I just also wanted to mention that is that, so I'm starting, Texas is now obviously my home as I still think personally, apart from Louisiana, which is stuck in the 1800s, but like the Texas coast is treated really badly from in general. Like I've seen third world countries, I've seen guys in Mongolia, in other places in the world that realize the value of their fishery. Like the thing that I get the sense of, and I don't want to shame anybody into it because you can ask any guide, international guide around the world, our favorite clients are American clients, and on top of that list is Texas clients because they're very patriotic and they're awesome. But like the odd thing that I see in the Texas coast is that it seems like I pay my taxes so I can keep as much as I want and I'm going to take it home, and people love catching their limits, and then they kind of give people fish that don't really eat fish and it ends up not being consumed, all that stuff. So like the next chapter for me personally, again, it's not necessarily what you accomplish but what you leave behind. So we're kind of starting to work on seeing what difference we can make. But strangely enough, in a first world country, it's almost a harder job to do than in a third world country where you can just have start right from the bottom and just really work your way up with those people for them to understand the actual monetary value in that fishery. So like, for example, like in the summertime, I personally don't like targeting redfish as much because I just feel bad for them. They get driven over all day, they're in warm water, low oxygen, they just like seem more unhappy. So most of the time when I'm guiding during the summertime, I'll be in deep water chasing bigger fish. I'll go into the flats if it's maybe close to deep water edge where the fish seem a little bit more fresh, but I think we can all just be stewards of our fishery. I mean, my whole life I've been taking from the whole resource, and now it's just kind of putting back into the resource, which I think just everybody wants to do. I think I may be preaching to the choir here, but that's the message that we can share. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of it.
That was awesome. Well, also let's open up for questions. You guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, that fishery. What is that fishery?
Yeah, what is that, man?
So that's a diamond. It's the biggest solenoid in the world.
Mongolia, right?
Yeah, so there's some Mongolia, but you get them in Austria, you get them in Siberia. We did an exploratory trip. So what I'll do is, if you want to, like all the guys, and the links for all the movies and stuff, as long as nobody starts a YouTube page, you just send it out, guys can watch them, whatever. There's a plethora, so you can maybe see some of these fish also. But Mongolia, for me personally, has been one of the nicest places on the planet. These fish aren't easy to catch. I had a client one day tell me he'll give me $1 million if I can find him a 50-inch timer, which is like the gold fish to catch. And my whole philosophy, I'm guiding every day as if somebody's going to give me $1 million. There's nothing else you can do. I'm not there to screw around. Right? I want to get you the biggest fish possible. But it is tricky to catch these fish. But the Mongolians are probably some of the best humans on the planet. They'll give you the clothes off their back. The best scene that I ever saw after a guiding season, it was my last day in Mongolia guiding. I came around the river bend, and my friends that are Mongolian started the Mongolian Fly Fishing Association, and I saw a guy in full Mongolian robe shooting out a spey rod like 120-foot spey cast, like just as I came around the river bed. And they consider these fish are like sacred to them. So one of my Mongolian, because I was a head guide and I had like a Mongolian guide that helped me with everything, and the president actually at one stage came to our river and he was fishing treble hooks. He didn't notice it was the president, so he ran up to the boat with him and completely harassed them to the point where they weren't fishing single barbless hooks, and eventually found out it was the president, so he had to go back and kind of apologize for his approach. But that just shows you, like, these guys don't mess around. So yeah.
So like diagnosing that, like you think about like a steelhead, obviously like they're all salmon boys, right?
Yeah.
But you go from trout to exposing into salt water to just get larger, right?
Yeah.
So what exactly makes that salmonoid look the way it looks?
So the odd thing is, in all the photos they look very snake-like. Obviously, they look this slender, but that fish's head is probably this wide. Like they are super wide. It's actually super tricky to hold them. And also just a fondest story of Mongolia is I had a client that also again like catches monster fish. I knew there was at least 2 in this one pond. Take him to it. He hooks a fish that was 30 inches. And all I just saw was a big tail come up. I said to him, slack up, just give it everything you got. And about like a minute in, I said to him, okay, just slowly tighten up. And I was on anchor. So I said to him, I think your fish just got eaten. And I pulled the anchor up. I said to him, what I want to do is theoretically in my mind, is your fish have been eaten. I want to get behind it. And I want to keep the line on the side of the mouth so we can actually see if we can land this thing. So eventually we got over the fish, and I mean, yeah, everything seems bigger, but it was definitely over 60 inches long. And what happened is we fought it for about, I'd say 15 minutes. And then what happened is this kamikaze move where it went under the boat, and I told my client to just let it go, and he held tight, broke the rod in 10 pieces, and the fish actually got regurgitated out. And the fish we landed was 30 inches, so, and he engulfed that fish completely. Like it was gone in one bite, poof, gone.
So is it also like streamers for them, or what?
So what we figured out later on, my first couple of seasons, I mean, we were fishing streamers that are like normal. We sometimes fish a squirrel pattern on the surface, but I figured out like to move a fish like that, the juice has got to be worth the squeeze. So I literally started fishing flies called the beast fly. That's like basically like the size of your forearm, and then like it'll make it worthwhile for that fish to move, because they also, the one thing that's nice in Mongolia is if it starts snowing, the fish realize they have to, the big fish, they have to stock up for the winter, so then they'll start feeding. Yeah. There's a river I still wanted to go fish called the Tuguru River in Siberia. Obviously Siberia and Russia is off limits now, but they have genetically the largest taimen there, where I've got a friend of mine that's a Russian that's caught several over 100 pounds on fly, and his biggest one is 128 pounds. A trout. They eat salmon, that's why they get so big.
What kind of rod do you use?
For those we use 12 weights. These ones we'll use 10 weights. Yeah. The biggest issue is they're not the craziest fighters. They're kind of like musky in that sense, where it's like very dramatic in the beginning and then they give up. But the thing that has an advantage is scurrying. So he'll just sit there with his big body and just sit there, and you can't move him. So especially if it's a 100-pound trout, you're not moving him anywhere. Those ones apparently have grown up to 200 pounds, but you know, it's a lot of folk stories and stuff.
So I got a question for you. So obviously, like the fascination with international is one fascination. The fascination with world records is another. Do you think I'm sure you've already gotten that though, but like, what brings you more to the international scene than to the world records? What allures you more?
The thing with the world records is that I see the fascination with it as another challenge, but for me personally, it kind of starts seeming ego-driven. Like again, I'm with these photos where I'm holding fish, I'm not really trying to flex. Now I'm trying to show you some of the fish that are out there, but for me, it genuinely doesn't matter. I think they do a lot of good things also for fisheries, but I think I've had to guide a few people that wanted to chase world records, and several things happened that made me completely put off by it. And the first one I actually landed was the first world record of a certain person, and the fish died. I was like, I'm not doing this again. And then the second and third time, there was other people that came and they were hooking fish, leaving them wearing flies. They were just like, they were doing stupid things that I just didn't seem, it just seemed like it was for them.
Disrespect.
Yeah, you're not putting any respect in. So, I mean, I've had some arguments with some pretty pretty famous people in the fly fishing industry, because recently there was a social media post where this person said, there was a photo of a guy in Mexico holding a big tarpon, and they were shaming this person, saying they're fighting the fish for 2 hours for personal gain, and they should tell the Mexican guys to fish class. I messaged him, I said to him, that's the most privileged statement you can make. Because firstly, that Mexican guy is not going to fish class because you want him to fish class. He's trying to feed his family. If he can land a fish and get an extra tip, I'm not blaming him. I mean, he's just purely trying to put food on the table. This is not an ego-driven thing for him. He just wants to get the client into a fish. So the mindset kind of changes a little bit, and yeah, that's why again I said just chasing world records just seemed like a thing that just, I mean, it's bigger picture to me.
You feel the same way about tournaments?
I personally don't like, so the only tournament that I do is the Barat Show, because it's a really nice, good event for a good cause, but I don't like the person I become, because my whole world revolves around seeing people catch fish and catch a fish of a lifetime. And when we fish a tournament and we go in tournament mode, then I don't want anybody else to catch fish, which then makes me an ugly person. Yeah, so I don't like that.
What are the questions?
You know more about jacks and GTs than probably anyone. And why do you think we don't care about jacks on the Texas coast?
I think that's the one thing I mentioned earlier. Like, I think you guys in the US have a lot of species, not just jacks, that are on your doorstep that for some reason a lot of fish got put on a pedestal. Like, again, we all love tarpon, and we
used to hate redfish.
Yeah, like, I think definitely everybody's starting to realize that there's more to it than just, I think that the whole thing, even when I was fishing with my dad, catching fish was fun, but it was also nice bringing something home to eat. So that mind frame was still kind of like really engraved. And then also, I don't know, like the other thing that I found amazing is like some of the guides I work with, they don't want to catch black drum on the coast. And we have like swamp donkeys out there, some giant ones, and they don't fight nice, they smell funny, but it's a fish that's 50 pounds sailing on a shallow piece of water. Why wouldn't you want to catch it?
Saul's the expert of the swamp dogs.
Everyone's not proud.
Yeah, it's weird, the jacks in particular, but I've seen more and more people now, but now the thing is like, we've created this beast, now we have to kick it back a little bit, because this year in Port O'Connor, we had guys treating them really bad, like conventional guys seeing we catching fish, so our clients are happy, and then they can get their clients into catching a few fish too before they go for their limits. And I saw guys gaffing them and throwing them back. We are starting to have an issue with sharks, and I'm a bit of a devil's advocate because I grew up fishing for sharks, catching and releasing, and I had a lot of jacks this year, or more than I'd like to, like half a dozen eaten by sharks. And people are saying there's more sharks than ever, and I'm saying to them, if you put this buffet of barbecue out on the street there, and people can have a free, amazing barbecue every day, that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to be there every day, and that's what the sharks are doing. They're coming from places, because my argument is we never had this issue in the Seychelles. Like the only time I've had fish eaten was twice, and that was 2 GTs that got eaten by barracudas, and it was nothing else, no shark issues. We have the same amount. But yeah, I can't recommend jacks enough. Like, just seeing that eat, the whole thing about it is, yeah.
And are you know about catching the parrotfish and everything from the Seychelles and stuff? Is fishing for them on the fly similar to how you target the sheep's head down here?
Oh yes, yeah, it's painful. Like I said, the jacks, the parrotfish. What happened is we actually had to, because they kind of forage, and theoretically they eat coral, but they also eat other little mollusks and little shrimps and stuff and crabs. And the method actually ended up being pretty simple, where we had to just lead a fish or a group of fish. And you just got to kind of keep it in a spot and just kind of keep the tension and just slowly touch it, like just move it around, and they usually just come up and forage and eat it.
Right.
The sheepies drive me insane more than anything else, because I've gone through these highlights, like super highs where I catch a couple in a week, and then suddenly like a month or 2 months ago, I don't even scratch one, and they just ignore everything. But again, I usually try and have a more simplistic thought process to all of that. I think sheepies a lot of times see us before we see them. That's why we don't catch them, because you're polling and there's the sheepy, poof. If I was a fish, I'd bounce too. Same thing with permit. I just don't think we get the fly in the right zone. For me, my most successful thing with sheepies was to get the fly down to the ground and then just drawing it away from him like a permit, and they were kind of try, not a permit or a trigger fish, and they try and pin it down and eventually get them. But the Texas sheepies and drum, I think, I'll die in this argument, are tougher to catch than the ones in Louisiana. In Louisiana, they're a little bit easier, I think. Yeah.
It's well known.
So strange.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird that a little fish like that can drive you so crazy though.
So, Jako, on some of the fish that you were talking about, the technical skill on trying to catch them, do you have a methodology on what you were attempting, with different flies and all that to try to get? Because it sounds like you had to have a lot of patience, for this 2-week period of time on what you were trying to catch that you had never caught before, or.
Yeah. Usually if I go to a fishery, I try and figure out a lot of the times what different species are out there. So with the parrotfish, we noticed them their first season, we tried a few times, we failed miserably, and then we went back to the drawing board and we started doing a little bit more research on them, and then kind of try to figure out what their diet is. And then the first thing you read is they only eat coral, and you're like, okay, well then it just seems impossible. But then you see a fish that size, why wouldn't it also eat whatever really gets in front of it? And then we started hooking a few, but we never knew, because the ratio of hook to land is 1 to 8. If you hook 8, you land 1. And we never knew whether you maybe foul hooked one, because they got this giant forehead, and sometimes you feel like you maybe hooked it in the forehead. And then at one stage, I remember it was pretty like, we'd land a couple, foul hook them, and then I had a specific fly that I tried, like more of a combination of a crab and a shrimp pattern. It's like a little bit of a buggy looking thing, and they actually ended up, we had one, I landed that one down the hatch, and then it started progressing from there. But most fish, the simplest thing is to put a few of those things together, and then the reality is the fly needs to just go in front of the fish without it seeing you, and then that's the basic story of it. And that's why I also think, again, why people say the Indo-Pacific permit is a little bit easier than the Atlantic permit, but the Atlantic permit you're always targeting off a boat most of the time, so you're standing high above, where Indo-Pacific permit we wade fishing, we're down in the water with them, so you're a little bit more camouflaged. So I think sometimes people overthink the elements and don't just think to the basic bare minimum of what the reality is. But then saying this, where one of the most amazing things that I saw 2 years ago is I was fishing X flats in Mexico, and I always felt like my fly wasn't getting in the right zone down to where the fish was looking. And then this, we did busy with a movie I did. It's a father and a son. The son's actually deaf, so just seeing them guide together is amazing. But he gives me this floating crab, like a big scoop that looks horrible. And he says, okay, we're gonna go try and catch one on a dry fly. And I didn't believe in it 100% at all. And he just said, give it a go, and I gave it a swirl, and the first like 5 permit I casted at, they literally became jacks. They literally just came out, woof, smoking that fly. So I was like, oh, that throws everything out. Let's go back to the drawing board. Yeah, but we're busy with the movie on it. It'll be pretty amazing just seeing them eat dry flies, because it's odd, because the permit has that nose, and you can see them like trying to get to it, and then yeah, it's kind of weird. And they whaled it.
So interesting with permit. Well, any other questions? Any other thoughts? Well, Jako, thanks so much for.
How long is long enough? I mean, if you're going to go to like a Seychelles type trip, like how long is long enough to give yourself a reasonable opportunity?
So usually the trips are booked at 6 days fishing, and that would be the time frame. But again, like I said, and again, any guys, if you consider a trip like this, whether you come on a trip with me or not, like even if you go, I said about the largest book in the seasons particularly, but I can start looking at more of the detailed stuff. So usually what I would do if I host a trip is I'll ask the guys. So I've got, for example, I've got Australia booked 2025, Bolivia 2025, because I'm looking at a moon. So I'm looking at the 1 or 2 elements that I can keep in my control. That's a moon phase and tidal movement. In the Seychelles, I would say, I've seen the craziest thing happen, but like a bigger moving tide definitely is better for like GTs. The neap tide is better for like permit, triggerfish, and all that stuff. So there's, depending on what you want to target, there could be a better time of the season. Yeah. So yeah.
It's good to know.
But otherwise, you just got to go and fish. And like I said, appreciate things going wrong as much as anything else. I know, yeah. I'll become a US ambassador. I'm telling you now. I'm telling you guys, this place is awesome. We live here. We're living the American dream. It's an amazing place. And again, thank you so much for having me.
No, of course, Jako.
Thank you.
Thanks again for it. And just, I mean, obviously, it was probably one of my favorites ever, man. It's unbelievable hearing that background. Well, just to dive deep into next year, this is our final event of 2023, so thanks for a great year. Next year, we got some great ones, and we just solidified our sixth one with Simon Gosworth, which should be fun. So we got.
He's gonna be good. He is one of the best speakers ever.
He's a beast.
And
And that's the thing, he's moving back to the UK, which is even weirder. So we're getting him to fly across the pond to speak with us next December. So just to describe him again, Steve Hallenbach we got in January. He's a doll sheep hunter and a rifle builder. So it's gonna be pretty nuts. I think he's guided to like 60 rams. So it's a pretty wild deal. He lives in, where in Alaska. I think Fairbanks or something. I can't remember. Anyways. Point being, like, obviously in the middle of nowhere. Fred Eichler, he's harvested every big game animal with a longbow, which is pretty unbelievable. He's a huge personality. That'll be nuts. We got Zach Bowden, who's, I think the chief videographer of Stone Glacier, based out of, I think it's Bozeman. He's huge into saltwater fly fishing. He's obviously a big game guy. He's actually the videographer that's filmed all of their films, which is including guiding to buffalo, elk, sheep. I mean, like all of it. So he's got some crazy stories. Gerald Smith, he's going to bring a number of dogs with him. He's going to bring a horse, but we cannot walk the tag on him. So he's going to be coming, which will be cool to just diagnose like training bird dogs and that kind of thing. Dave
Orvis
Hahn.
supermodel.
That's right, dude. He's
on our barber ads downstairs.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's gotten way into the industry. Dave Hahn, he has climbed Everest more than any other non-Sherpa on the planet, which is insane that we're actually getting this guy to speak with us. So he's climbing mountains literally every day of the year. So carving that off has been wild. And then obviously Simon, arguably the best expert in spay casting on the planet. He's a beast. So, point being, we got some good ones next year.